Christine, we've heard a lot about tariffs over the last couple weeks. Talk to us about the scope and scale of these compared to what's been discussed in the past.
So these are much larger than what has been discussed in the past, not only in terms of magnitude of the tariffs, but also in terms of the amount of trade that it will affect. So, the North American economy is a powerhouse, and the U.S. is at the center of that. It's a big, big part of it. It's a big producer. It's a big consumer. We have products going back and forth across the border, several times before it ends in a finished product. Just looking at the tech and chip sector alone, just doing some back of the envelope. This morning, we're talking about $53 billion in tariffs paid. So the U.S. imports from Canada about $43 billion worth in tech and chips, and from Mexico it's about $168 billion. So 25% of that, over $50 billion in tariffs, and that's going to come out of the North American economy. And so whether it's Mexico, U.S., or Canada, depending on different market factors, but it's definitely not going to lower prices for U.S. consumers, and so it's just a matter of how much it will raise prices.
Yeah.
And then overall, just looking at the entire North American trading relationship, we're looking at $227 billion in tariffs. So, these are not small numbers.
Yeah, well, let's break it down here into some of the industry-specific areas. We focused a lot on this network on kind of the bigger areas like automotives. Obviously, commodities are going to be impacted as well. But in the area of technology, are there sort of direct tariffs that we should be looking at that could actually impact technology products that are crossing the borders?
Yeah, yes. I mean, there's so many. I mean, so look at the raw materials, coming from Canada, the component production that happens in some in Canada, a lot in Mexico, the assembly, testing, and packaging that happens largely in Mexico. That will all really hurt the pricing power of U.S. Sellers, U.S. businesses here. And it will either eat into their profit margins, or they'll pass it on to U.S. consumers, or the Canadians and Mexicans will take a hit. I mean, we're looking at a sector where there's been like $500 billion to $1 trillion of investment announced just in the U.S. and recently. So it's the tariffs will make it's going to be harder to get a good bang for the buck with these tariffs.
Yeah, and of course, for a lot of folks, they're going to start to see those tariffs kick in overnight tonight. March 4th, of course, is the deadline, at least for those big ones on Mexico and Canada. Additional tariffs down the road. And of course, these reciprocal tariffs, Christine, that the president has also spoken about here. You've been on the inside. I mean, you know what goes on inside the trade rep's office. You know what goes inside the Department of Commerce. You know what goes on inside the ITC. Are those mechanisms for debate and, more importantly, for negotiation still there? Or is this pretty much a negotiating process that begins and ends with Trump himself?
Yeah, this is a very different USTR commerce experience, than what was under the George W. Bush administration. There is, of course, interagency analysis and meetings that happen, but in terms of to what extent that analysis really feeds into and can affect the president's decision making is something else. I mean, I remember with the Bush administration, we had a number of interagency meetings where we always were asked, what would be the national economic effect? Is this in the national economic interest? And the White House was always interested in the downstream effects. I mean, very seriously interested. And that would often come into be a pretty big part of their decision making. You don't necessarily see that with this current administration, but it's still early days. I mean, there's still several hours of the day left. Commerce Secretary Lutnick over the weekend said the situation is fluid, that they feel apparently that Canada and Mexico have made a lot of progress on the border, and they're very happy they've had the lowest crossing ever on the border. But they're still concerned, if fentanyl continues to come into the country. So maybe it won't be 25%, maybe it will be something less.
Yeah.
So everybody's under sort of a wait and see approach, which
Yeah.
apparently is, what they like people to be in that position.